The African penguin is currently listed as a vulnerable species. So in terms of the IUCN, which is the International World Conservation Union, they've listed it as vulnerable to extinction. But due to sort of latest trends in African population breeding census that we do in Southern Africa, their numbers have dropped very dramatically. And so it's highly likely that in the near future they will be upgraded or downgraded, depending on your point of view, to endangered.
Approximately 5 miles from Gansbaai, you will find Daya Island. This 20-hectare nature reserve is managed by Cape Nature and has been listed as an important bird area. The island is resting place for an array of seabirds, including Cape cormorants, kelp gulls, and the African penguin, the latter of which has been under increasing threat of survival.
In the 1970s, Daya Island had the largest, or the world's largest, African penguin population. There was about 25,000 breeding pairs, and if you include the non-breeders, it amounted to about 70,000 birds. Now, which 30 years later, that number's down to about 1,500 breeding pairs, which is a substantial drop in just a few years.
Cape Nature started managing Daya Island in 1994. We took over from Marine and Coastal Management that year and went on with basic monitoring on the island. A couple of years down the line, we hit a major disaster where most of our Cape cormorants got avian cholera. And members of the community started showing interest in assisting us with this disaster. So we can basically say that in times of disaster, people get together. And this informal partnership just grew. And in 2006, these members of the community formed the Daya Island Conservation Trust. And they started helping us with a major project where we started building artificial nest sites for the African penguin, and also assisting us in one of the pioneer projects that we started, the orphan chick program, where we'll take orphan chicks off the island and raise them at Sandkop.
The Daya Island Conservation Trust, I must say, it's at the moment most of our work goes about penguins and the conservation of penguins, because that's how we started off. At the same time, the Trust will also be looking at all the animals in the area. We've got fantastic whales that needs our attention and our care, as well as great white sharks. So penguin-wise, we're lobbying all over the country and if possible worldwide for the conservation of penguins, and specifically the African penguin.
There are several reasons for the decline in penguin numbers. In some instances, these threats are natural, but in many others, these creatures are facing danger both directly and indirectly by man.
The reasons for this decline are sort of historical reasons, and then also threats that they currently face. In the 18 and 1900s, all the offshore islands that were breeding colonies for penguins had a history of penguin egg collection and guano scraping, and that had a profound impact on the number of breeding birds in the population. Daya Island, for example, guano scraping started in about the 1850s, and it only stopped in 1983. So you can have a look and see this sort of island here is just, it's rocky. The guano would have been about 3 or 4 meters high, and it's very soft, and that's what the penguins would burrow into. And now with this habitat, this burrowing habitat being removed, the penguins are being forced to breed on the surface. It's what you can see on the birds sort of behind. And what that means is that because they're breeding on the surface now, and their breeding season on Daya starts in summer, the adults are exposed to heat stress, and if they get too hot, they go down to the sea to cool down, and it leaves their eggs and their small chick exposed to predation by kelp gulls, and that could in effect wipe out the first initial breeding of the African penguins on the island. Oiling is another big problem that the birds face. Another really important problem nowadays is competition or a lack of food resources, and this is due to competition with commercial fisheries. The main food source for African penguins is pelagic fish, sardine and anchovy, and they compete in a sense with commercial fisheries for this resource. And specifically when the birds are breeding, they are limited to a certain range within their breeding colony, pretty much to 30 to 40 kilometer radius around their breeding colony. And if those shipping vessels are fishing within that area, the penguins are suffering or not able to provide enough food for their chicks.
I think it's critically important is that the trust and a lot of the trust members has been involved in trying to convince the authorities to have exclusive zones around the islands of South Africa for to protect the feeding of the seabirds. We can do as much as we want on this island to protect the birds here, but unless they have food to eat, nothing will help here. So we've been instrumental in setting up a closer zone around one of our west coast islands, and hopefully it'll come to Dyer Island as well as the islands on the east coast in the end, so that these birds, number one, have enough to eat. Then we can look at their housing, we can look at predation and all those other things.
Dyer Island Conservation Trust has been instrumental in initiating efforts to grow penguin population figures. Currently, these efforts are focusing on ensuring that each breeding season is a successful one.
So in order to deal with this, the decline in the African penguin numbers, and to try and do as much as we can do on the land where the birds breed, the Dyer Island Conservation Trust has embarked on a project in partnership with Cape Nature in order to provide artificial nesting habitat for the birds in replace of the guano. And these artificial nests are made on the mainland, enhanced by a local community project, and then they're brought onto Dyer Island, and we place them in conjunction with Cape Nature in areas where the birds had been breeding the previous season.
The other critically important thing is that we have Lauren Waller at the moment, and she's doing incredible, important scientific work on the penguins on Dyer Island. I don't think ever in the history of Dyer Island there's been more intensive work done on the penguins than exactly now. And then the other thing that the Trust do is we're hoping that through the Dyer Island Conservation Trust we can get people that didn't work together previously come together and work together for the conservation of South Africa's penguins. Quite often we feel ourselves more important than the cause, but I really hope that the cause of the African penguin is more important than any one individual.
So part of the reason for the current success of the Trust is just the support that we've had from the local community. And the Trust is really looking to support as many of the African penguin breeding colonies as possible. But that's obviously not possible without the support of individuals, companies, corporates, and so we really are looking for additional sponsorship from local, international people, companies, and the way that people can get involved is just to support the Nest project. What enables us to buy and produce the nests. It enables us to buy equipment that we need to do research on the monitoring, and you can have a look at the DRCT website for more details on how you can support the Dyer Island Conservation Trust.